This is Emmeline Pankhurst, an activist, constant fighter and head suffragette, a woman named by the Times as one of the 100 most important people of the 20th century. And this is her story. Even though her birth certificate says otherwise, she claimed she was born on Bastille Day on 14th of July 1858. She grew up in Manchester in a very politically active family. Along with her 9 siblings, she enjoyed a happy childhood. Despite her open-minded family, she was not given the education her brothers enjoyed. Once, when Emmeline was pretending to sleep, she heard her father say,
"What a pity, she wasn't born a lad."
At the age of 15, she went to Paris, where she spent several years studying and reading inspirational books. After finishing the school, she began a relationship with Richard Pankhurst, a barrister advocating women's suffrage. During the 1880s, she gave birth to 5 children, but the youngest of them had passed away at the age of 4. In 1888, some of the activists left the first nationwide suffragist organization and formed a new one. Emmeline joined the latter, but soon after she realized it didn't care at all about married women's voting rights. PPS maintained that their husbands could vote on their behalf. The Pankhursts had formed a new organization which was not only fighting for women's voting rights but also, for example, for their right to divorce. It led to perception of the group as extreme left-wing, and 1 year later, its disintegration. Emmeline began to work with several political organizations, gaining respect in the community and stepping out from Richard's shadow. She met a man named Keir Hardie, who was one of the founders of the Independent Labour Party. Emmeline was happy to join his group. She started her charity work immediately, spending next years on giving food to starving people and helping to get them out of the workhouses, where they stayed in inhumane conditions. In December 1894, she was elected a Poor Law Guardian. Then, Richard started to experience some serious troubles with his stomach, which eventually led to his death by the end of 1898. Taking care of the house went completely on her, although Christabel, her oldest daughter, was very supportive both in her household duties and her activist efforts. One day, Emmeline sadly realized that her attempts didn't have any impact on women's rights. She decided to leave ILP and founded an organization called Women's Social and Political Union. Then the first Emmeline's Parliament demonstration happened, in which all 3 of her daughters, now all politically active, were arrested. In 1907, she sold her house and began to travel, living in hotels and at her friends' places. She gave speeches during marches and demonstrations. A year later, Emmeline was arrested for the first time when she was trying to deliver her manifesto to the Parliament. In 1909, the suffragettes started to express their fury through hunger strikes. The response of the authorities was force feeding, which only fueled their rage. In 1910, her son Harry had died after the inflammation of his spinal cord. A few months later, an ILP member had formed a coalition supporting women's suffrage. In exchange, Pankhurst had promised to stop promoting window breaking and other similar actions. But when she noticed the party's moves are doomed to failure, her anger and efforts redoubled. She led a march of 300 women to Parliament Square, which received a very aggressive response from the police. The policemen have twisted suffragettes' arm and pushed them. At the end of 1912, suffragettes had even resorted to arsoning, which was openly supported by Emmeline. Because of the violent politics of WSPU, many members, including Adela and Sylvia, Emmeline's daughters, had left the group. She then became extremely close with Christabel and didn't plan to change the way of her actions at all. In fact, on November 1913, she gave one of her most famous speeches in which she explained her violent attitudes. "Well, in a civil war, people have suffered, but you cannot make omelets without breaking eggs. The great thing is to see that no more damage is done that is absolutely necessary to bring about peace. I come to ask you to help to win this fight. If we win it, this hardest of all fights, then, to be sure, in the future it is going to be made easy for women all over the world to win their fight when their time comes." In the beginning of 1914, she published her autobiography. In August 1914, World War I had begun. Emmeline made a truce with the government and openly supported the war. She believed that while men were fighting on the front, there was a chance for women to take care of the country. Both Sylvia and Adela were huge pacifists, which their mother hotly disapproved. In 1915, she established a children's home for war orphans and adopted 4 of them herself. She kept on visiting United States and Canada to raise money and urge the government to support her country and other allies. In August, she met with the Russian Prime Minister of those times. They did not get along well. After coming back home from her trip to Russia, she was delighted to see effects of the years of fighting for the suffrage. The Representation of the People Act had finally changed the eternal law by giving the voting rights to women at the age of 30. After her first real success, Emmeline started to fight for more gender equality. In 1919, the act, which gave women rights to run for the House of Commons, had been set out. Nevertheless, the Women's Party candidate, Christabel, had lost to the Labour Party one. In 1926, Emmeline joined the Conservative Party. People were astonished by her change, from the window-smashing supporter of ILP to an official conservative. When Pankhurst's health significantly deteriorated, she moved out to a nursing home. She died at the age of 69, June 14, 1928, and was buried in London. Shortly after the funeral, her statue in Victoria Tower Gardens was raised.